When the African Union arrived in Burkina Faso, this is what shocked them most. When the African Union delegation stepped onto the soil of Burkina Faso, they expected the usual: formal protocols, polite greetings, and a fragile government trying to meet international expectations. What they found instead was something that left them stunned and speechless. Burkina Faso had transformed almost overnight, not just in governance, but in spirit, in pride, and in raw, unshakable patriotism. They were welcomed not by timid politicians, but by a wave of bold young patriots, disciplined soldiers, and civilians who stood tall with one message: Africa must rise, and Burkina Faso will lead. The AU came with questions about democracy, about power transitions, about international alignment, but what they met was a people who had reclaimed their destiny, led by a young, defiant, and fearless leader, Captain Ibrahim. No long speeches, no empty words, just results. Roads were being repaired by local hands. Schools were filled again with the laughter of children taught about African heroes, not colonial masters. Farmers, once forgotten, were given tools, support, and above all, respect. And the soldiers? They weren't just standing guard. They were rebuilding homes, protecting villages, and training the youth to defend what belongs to them. The African Union didn't expect to see soldiers and civilians working side by side. They didn't expect to see women leading community groups, organizing food supplies, and managing local development. They didn't expect to see murals of Sankara on every wall, with words like dignity or death painted with love. They didn't expect to see a country that, despite sanctions and threats, stood firm and refused to beg for foreign aid. Burkina Faso was no longer kneeling. It had stood up, and it was walking with its head high. What shocked them most wasn't the military control. It was the unity, the order, the conviction. In a continent so often portrayed as divided and chaotic, Burkina Faso had become a lighthouse of hope, a model of what Africa could be when it shakes off its chains. There was no need to ask who was in control. The people were. Not just one man, not just the army, but a whole population, young, proud, and fearless, had taken ownership of their country's future. And to you watching this right now, ask yourself, what if all of Africa followed this path? What if we stopped waiting for permission and started building our nations with our own hands? Burkina Faso has shown us that it is possible, that patriotism isn't just a word, it's an action, a commitment, a fire that must burn in every African heart. If this story touches something deep inside you, then don't scroll past. Comment below what you think the rest of Africa can learn from Burkina Faso. Share this video to awaken another soul. And if you believe Africa is rising, if you believe our future is in our hands, then hit that subscribe button and be part of the movement. This is just the beginning. As the African Union delegation moved through the streets of Ouagadougou, their eyes widened, not from luxury, but from something far more powerful. A nation rebuilding itself with its bare hands. They expected to see broken systems, abandoned neighborhoods, and people waiting for help. Instead, they witnessed a revolution in motion. Youths were painting murals of resistance. Markets were booming with local produce. Neighborhoods once gripped by fear were now safe, buzzing with hope, pride, and purpose. The people weren't waiting for government handouts or foreign donations. They were building, protecting, and leading. What truly shook the AU officials wasn't the sight of guns or uniforms. It was the discipline, the unity of purpose. Everyone from the elderly to the children had a role to play. They met women who had organized themselves into food cooperatives to feed both civilians and soldiers. They saw young men volunteering to clear streets, rebuild schools, and plant trees. This wasn't charity. This was ownership. A people no longer under the illusion that someone else would save them. A people who realized, if we don't do it, no one will. And at the center of it all was a leader who walked among them, not hidden behind tinted glass or armored convoys. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, barely in his mid-30s, was not living in a palace. He was with the soldiers, eating with them, fighting with them, bleeding with them. He was not just a president, he was a brother, a son, a fighter. The AU delegates could barely believe their eyes. A leader with no lust for luxury, no hunger for power, only an obsession for freedom. One delegate was overheard saying, This is not what we expected. And they were right. Because for decades, Africa has been used to seeing power corrupt. But here, in this humble yet defiant nation, they saw something rare: power purified by purpose. The most powerful moment of their visit came not from any speech, but from a quiet ceremony. They were taken to a burial site, not of presidents or elites, but of fallen volunteers, young men and women who had died protecting their villages from terrorists. There were no golden caskets, just wooden plaques and tears from villagers who knew every name. The AU delegation stood in silence, deeply moved. In that moment, they saw something the world rarely sees: the price of true patriotism. And now I want to ask you, watching this right now, what are you willing to give for your country? What will you do when your children ask what role you played in Africa's rebirth? Because make no mistake, this is a movement, not just in Burkina Faso, but across Mali, Niger, Guinea, and beyond. The fire is spreading, and you are either part of the flame or part of the silence. So if this message stirs your heart, if you believe Africa deserves more, then like this video, share it with your family, your friends, your community. Let them know something powerful is happening. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter of this revolution. Together, let's rise.